Judge Gray never came home. His car was in the parking lot. His courtroom was locked from the inside. The phone was disconnected. His wife called the police 3 hours later. An internal investigation was launched. Security claimed that the judge left the building at 8:05 p.m., but no camera recorded his exit. The last thing that could be found was his shadow on the floor of courtroom number 3, almost like a nightmare. A folder on the table, without a single word on the pages, only the date, June 14th, 2024. This date haunted everyone associated with this case over and over again. Investigators requested case number 74, but it was not listed in the database. The archive was empty. No protocols, reports, testimony. Everything was deleted. Who was the accused? What was the essence of the case? Why was the hearing classified? Prosecutor Roger Ells, assigned to the trial, disappeared on the day of the verdict. The official version was an urgent business trip, but neighbors claimed that a man in a long black coat came into his house at night. The light turned on and then went out. Ells never showed up again. 48 hours later, the judge's assistant disappeared, then the secretary. A week later, the investigator who was trying to reconstruct the chronology of the case disappeared. They all had the same pattern: a sudden loss of communication, an empty house, no evidence. Not a single one of them was found, either alive or dead. Journalists called this case cursed. One of them, Thomas Glein, began a private investigation. In his blog, he wrote, "I found 14 names associated with case number 74. 12 of them are dead or missing. I'm not sure who's next, but I can already hear footsteps outside the door." A day later, his apartment burned down. The cause of the fire has not been established. The only clue is the date of June 14th, 2024. On this day, 3 months before the trial, there was a strange power outage in Overton. For 6 minutes. Those 6 minutes seemed to be a moment in which reality itself was held back. It was during this period that 2 unknown signals were recorded from a closed area outside the city, the former scientific complex Limbus. The complex was built in the 80s for military research. Since 2001, experiments in sensory deprivation have been conducted there. People were placed in conditions of complete isolation from light, sound, time. Results: hallucinations, psychosis, suicides. But the strangest thing was that the documents mentioned the name of prisoner number 74. In the notes column, "He knows when you sleep." The same figure flickers in all the recordings related to the case, a tall man in a long black cloak. He never turns to the camera. He can be seen in the reflection of shop windows, the shadows of corridors, the glass of cars. Experts have established that those who have seen him begin to suffer from insomnia, panic attacks, hallucinations. Everyone who encountered this man became part of his world, fell into his trap. One of the court security guards, Matthew Rice, was hospitalized 2 days after the judge's disappearance. Under the influence of sedatives, he repeated, "He was standing in the corner. He wasn't breathing. He just stared." I heard him whisper the date, 14/6/24. Journalist Amy Walsh ventured into courtroom 3 a month later. She spent 40 minutes there. When she came out, her hair had turned white. The equipment stopped working. The only thing that remained on the tape recorder was a man's voice. "You weren't supposed to come. Now you're inside." The next day, Amy disappeared. A camera near her home captured a figure in black standing in front of the entrance. He didn't move. The recording ends. When it became known that Judge Gray had disappeared, the police began searching for his body, but it was never found. The tracks in the courtroom led only to emptiness. In the following days, the search for the judge continued, but all was in vain. His disappearance was officially declared unexplained. 2 months later, the court declared case number 74 closed. The wording, "No composition, no parties, no evidence." All references were deleted. But among the shadows of the disappearing people, among the empty houses and silent voices, new rumors about the man in black began to appear. Those who heard his footsteps assured that he was not just watching. He was waiting for something. A surveillance camera that was not on the plans was found in the basement of the court. It had a 3-minute fragment, an empty courtroom, and then a man in black appears. He sits down in the judge's seat and looks straight into the camera. The last frame is his eyes, completely black. Despite the official closure of the case, strange events continued to happen in the city. Some claimed to have seen a figure in black outside the court, others to have heard a voice in the empty streets, like a whisper that penetrated the darkest corners of their nightmares. Some lost their minds. Others began to search for answers, hoping to somehow dispel this darkness. And then, 6 months after the judge's disappearance, something happened that turned everything upside down. The next morning after the evening power outage in Overton, several unidentified bodies were found in the city center. They were lying on the bridge, in the same place where the locals had seen a man in black the night before. The victims' faces were distorted with horror, but the strangest thing was that each had a scar, as if their skin had been torn with the tip of a knife, and on each body was the same date, June 14th, 2024. The police could not find logic in these murders, but when experts began to analyze the bodies, they found astonishing coincidences with the missing people. All of them were connected to case number 74, or at least were mentioned in the investigations. And among these deaths, a new element appeared. Not only the shadow of a man in black, but also a strange mark on the body of each of the victims. Inside their chests, numbers were burned. 74. At this point, the best detectives in the country took over the investigation, including Maria Carson, an experienced investigator who attracted attention not only for her determination, but also for the mysterious events that had happened in her life several years earlier. Carson was obsessed with solving the mystery of what had happened to the judge's case, and at some point she realized that these murders and disappearances were just the tip of the iceberg. During one of her night shifts at the courthouse, Maria was overtaken by a feeling that could not be described in words. He was there, this man, in black. She felt his presence, as if he was right behind her, although she was sure that there was no one in the room. Then as Maria headed toward the empty room number 3, her gaze caught a strange light at the end of the corridor. With each step, her heart beat faster. The light flickered, reflecting in the glass. At first she thought it was a camera, but as she got closer, the light went out, leaving only dark shadows behind. Maria entered Hall 3 and froze. There in the darkness stood a man in black, his face hidden under a hood. His eyes shone in the semi-darkness. They were absolutely black, like night. "You shouldn't have come here." His voice was low, almost inaudible, but there was a power in it that penetrated her to the bone. Maria was overcome with horror, but she could not look away. He approached her slowly, his footsteps echoing through the empty hall. She felt her legs refuse to move. "He's here to take me," she thought, but all she could do was stand and watch as the figure approached. And then she noticed a seal on the floor, right in front of her, a black circle, similar to the one she had seen in the documents of case number 74. And then the shadow screamed, but not in reality. It was in her head. He looked at her, and her mind was filled with an eerie whisper. "You are the only one who has not disappeared yet. Your fate has already been written." And at that moment, when Maria froze in fear, her gaze fell on the walls. There, on the other side of the mirror, in the mirror's reflection, another man in black appeared, the one she was looking for. But now his eyes were alive. They were watching her, as if predicting her end. Maria could no longer control herself. Her body became motionless, as if the darkness itself was taking away her strength. She tried to scream, but she could not. The hall became darker with every step, and at that moment she felt her world begin to shrink. His footsteps were louder than her own heart. In the last entry she managed to make before her cell phone died, she left only one word: everything. The next morning the city was again swallowed by silence. The power went out in Overton again, this time for several hours. Strange things began to happen again. Echoes of missing people, forgotten names, lost documents. All this became part of something bigger, more terrible. There was no publicity, no trace, only a shadow that did not leave the city. The police continued to investigate the disappearances, but the reports led to dead ends. But the more people tried to find answers, the more they found themselves caught in the cycle. Strange events haunted anyone who threatened to reveal the truth. A few days before Maria Carson disappeared, another strange find was made in a small town. In an old cemetery, where people sometimes left flowers on the graves of the dead, someone dug a hole and left a black glove there. The glove was made of a special material that resembled leather. On it was a dull trace, as if it were covered in ash. The closest trace to this trace, as it was later discovered, was the trace of the man who disappeared in case number 74. And this trace led to an abandoned building on the outskirts of town, the very one that hid everything from view. In this place, deep underground, there was a tunnel. It was dark inside and the air was heavy, as if the world itself was pulling this piece of forgotten nightmare towards itself. Maria, unable to resist any longer, went there, into this place of foggy reality. They said that this tunnel led to the very source of everything. It was there, according to rumors, that people disappeared. Absolute darkness awaited her below. As Carson descended the stairs into the tunnel, she felt as if her every movement was being compressed by an unknown force, and then she heard it. A whisper, as if the whole world was holding its breath. You know what will happen next. You know what happens in this place. You will not be able to get out anymore. A voice rang out, and Carson felt her body begin to refuse to move, as if someone from within was filling her consciousness, forcing her mind to lose all perception of reality. All she could see were black eyes in the corner of her vision, eyes that seemed alive and eerie, like death itself. At that moment, her awareness broke. Her vision became clouded, and she could no longer tell where reality ended and where the nightmare began. A figure stood before her, black as the shadow itself, a man in black. And it wasn't just any man. It was the one behind this nightmare, the one who manipulated people, their fears, their minds. He was here to take her. Flashes from her own past flashed through her mind. Moments she could never forget, moments she tried to forget. They all came back now, like ominous shadows, and they all led her to one thing, this man. And then, at the last moment, as she prepared to swallow this darkness that she didn't know, the figure in black stepped forward. You must be ready. This is your destiny, Carson. His words penetrated her soul, and she realized that he was right. Everything that had happened was connected to her, and to case number 74. And it was at that moment, the darkest moment, when Carson felt that her consciousness was ready to give in, that her eyes filled with blood. Her inner world collapsed, and she became part of this nightmare, part of this unspeakable horror. Her consciousness was swallowed by darkness. She was gone, like everyone before her. Now Maria Carson was part of this endless shadow, this cycle that continued to envelop everything connected to Case 74. With each disappearance, with each new step into this nightmare, they were getting closer to a solution that was never meant to be found. Her disappearance left behind only a void, and another shadow that would now find its way through the city, through these secrets, and through the people who dared to dig too deep. Maria Carson was gone, but her disappearance was not the end. A few days after the event, the local police received a strange message. An unsigned voicemail had arrived on the cell phone of one of the officers. The recording was faint, distorted, as if someone was trying to hide their identity. But the words on it were clear. He came again. We are all inside. We are all here, underground. Officer Wade Holmes, who had just analyzed the recording, felt a growing sense of anxiety. It seemed as if something huge and unimaginable was growing around him, something that had been waiting for the right moment to reveal its true power for a long time. Unable to cope with this pressure, Wade decided to turn to independent researchers to figure out what was happening. They began to study documents, archives, and everything that could lead to solving this terrible case. Everything pointed to one place, the former scientific complex Limbus, and it was not abandoned, as official sources claimed. It still existed, but now it was under surveillance, as if it was watching every step of people who tried to get to its dark secret. When Wade and his team arrived there, they found that the complex was heavily guarded, but something was wrong. Inside, they found many sealed documents, all with the same date, June 14th, 2024. These documents, like all the others, were unopened, but one thing was clear. They all related to case number 74. The questions multiplied, but the answers never came. After studying the records, Wade found a strange video clip, dated the same day, June 14th, 2024. The video showed one of the Limbus researchers who was known for his daring experiments. He looked into the camera and said, I wasn't supposed to know. He came to me, and I couldn't do anything about it. He took them. He will take me too. The picture on the screen was interrupted, and then there was a short sound, as if something was moving, disappearing into thin air. Wade already felt that this complex was not just a research lab. It was a portal that was closed, but with each disappearance, it opened more and more. Finding himself in the very center of the complex, Wade noticed how the walls were gradually beginning to crack. They moved as if by themselves, and through every crack there was light, but not ordinary light. It was a cold yellow light, a light that seemed to beckon them into the very depths. And then he realized, case number 74 was not just the disappearance of people. It was a process in which the souls of these people passed into something else, into another dimension where there was no time and space. The man in black was just a link in this chain. He was the one who dragged them there, into the very heart of this nightmare. Wade was on the verge of understanding how it all worked. But at that moment, his eyes caught something in the corner, that same figure in black. He stood in the shadows as always, hunched over and silent. Wade couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't call for help. His body was paralyzed by this look, this presence. He felt the ground beneath him begin to disappear, and he himself, as if in a trance, took a step forward, step by step, as if led by this man. And then finally he came too close. The man in black turned to him. His face was hidden in the shadows, and only his eyes, completely black, looked straight into Wade's soul. "You could have left, but you didn't leave." His voice was cold and empty, like the darkness itself. Wade tried to scream, but his voice was stuck inside. He was already inside, and everything around him began to spin. The walls of the complex seemed to come to life. It was not just space, it was a living, breathing organism that absorbed everything. Everything it touched, everything that fell within its boundaries became part of this nightmare. The next one to disappear was Wade, and after a while, when everything was quiet, only a screen remained in the empty room of the complex. On it, a recording made a few minutes before Wade disappeared flashes. A man in black appears on the screen. He stands looking at the camera, and his eyes are completely black, like the shadow itself. And in his hands is a date. This date continues to haunt everyone who tries to get closer to the solution. Everything becomes part of the inevitable shadow, and whoever dares to find the answers will be consumed by this endless cycle. A few weeks after Wade's disappearance, the investigation was officially closed. However, the same story continued to circulate in the town of Overton. Strange messages began to arrive on the phones of former court employees, lawyers, and even those who were somehow connected with case number 74. Each message contained one single word, and each time, the person who received this message disappeared, as if dissolving into thin air. But one day late in the evening, a new trace appeared in an abandoned parking lot near an old movie theater. A surveillance camera recorded a silhouette moving in the shadows. It stopped at the window of one of the houses, stood for a few seconds, and disappeared into the foggy night. When the police arrived at the scene, they found traces and a photograph. It was a photograph of the courtroom, but this time the lens did not capture an empty dock, but a figure in black. And in the photo, in the very center, was the date, June 14th, 2024. The moment the photograph was shown on television, something strange happened. People who saw the image began to notice that everything around them seemed to be getting darker, and their bodies were filled with an eerie feeling that everything they knew was not real. As if it was all an illusion, a trap. And now they were part of something much bigger and much more sinister. And that was only the beginning. On June 14th, 2025, exactly 1 year later, a new trial began in Overton. All the same faces, new judges, new guards, new documents. No one knew that in the dock sat someone or something that exactly repeated the figure that once appeared in the shadows of courtroom number 3. But no one could tell or see what was really happening. And the scariest thing, everyone who tried to figure it out was gone. One thing is certain, at some point, exactly at 0000, a single image will appear on the camera screens. This will be repeated until the end of time, or until each of us is inside.